Greetings, and welcome to the show. This is A Wrong Place, a Right Crime. I'm your host, Frank Zafiro, and in this episode, we are going to talk to Brian Brady. Brian is an experienced and retired law enforcement officer and a super interesting guy. I know I say that a lot, but I don't book boring people, so they all are super interesting, and Brian is no exception. A lot of experience on the job and in life to pour into his books, and I think you're going to see that as the conversation progresses. So without further ado, let's just dive straight into my interview with Brian Brady.
Well, hey, Brian, welcome to the show.
Fine. Thank you. I appreciate having me.
Well, I appreciate you being on. We were talking off mic about how we're having a second conversation due to some technical difficulties first time around.
Well, between the new headset and the switching mode, I think we're okay.
You know, this is a podcast that we feature crime fiction writers, but not many of them fit the bill that you do, which is also being a retired law enforcement officer. That's a much smaller percentage of guests, but you do fit that bill. You're retired off the job.
That's true. I've got 35 years in law enforcement with 4 different departments in 2 states, and retired as a police chief. And then I've got another dozen years in executive level corporate security.
35 years that's one hell of a career there in law enforcement. I mean, it's a young man's game compared to some businesses where 35 years is a normal career.
Well, it you separate people when, or it comes to the realization when you're working a night shift and you got to chase somebody over a 6-foot fence or 7-foot fence. The 22-year-old can do that a lot better than you can.
Yeah. The 52-year-old is thinking, there's a radio on my belt where I can call a 22-year-old.
there was a great line from the movie Sea of Love with Al Pacino and John Goodman. And Pacino, they're at a party, and Pacino gets into a scrape, and he has all these martial art moves, and Goodman looks at him and says, "That's pretty impressive." And he says, "Yeah, I really practice this all the time. I'm really good at it." And Goodman says, "That's why God gave us fat guys guns."
That's pretty good. I didn't remember that. I like that movie too. Wasn't that the one Ellen Barkin was the femme fatale in that one?
Yeah. It was a good movie.
Yeah. Well, Al Pacino doesn't make many dogs. I mean, he's and even in the doggy ones, he's not. He's still pretty good.
And every once in a while, you'll get a movie like Heat, where you get De Niro and Pacino, and I would love to have been the director trying to referee that one.
Yeah, that is a. That movie comes up a lot, and there's a reason for it. It's just it's a fantastic film. It's one of my top 5 movies, probably.
A good friend of mine was a tech advisor on that, and it was he actually got a speaking part in the movie. He said he gets a check every time it runs for $1.
What role did he have?
If you remember in the movie at the end when they're in the hotel. And the police have staked it out, and there's a desk clerk who's sitting behind the counter with a shotgun. That's him.
Really?
Yeah. He gets to answer the phone and say hello, and that's all you need is one word, and you have a speaking part. You get residual.
You're in the SAG at that point.
That's it.
I can't remember who it was that I talked to. I talked to the wife of the guy who, when Val Kilmer goes and they set the trap for him, and so Chris Chehalis pulls up and he looks up and he sees Charlene and she gives him the no good sign, and he turns away and leaves. They stop him. The cop that makes the traffic stop and checks his license and radios it in is a real cop as well. Oh. And his wife, I can't remember, maybe it was at a writer's conference or something. I can't remember where I talked to her, but she was super proud of that. And I'd be like, shoot, I would be too.
Yeah, it was a good movie. the tech advisor part is tough because you want to keep it real, and you have a director or um, a star who wants something that isn't, it's not going to fit, but you got to find a way to make it fit in. Um, you're playing to an audience, and oftentimes the audience isn't all that concerned with how technically correct you are.
Mm-hmm.
But as a cop, you watch it and you go, "Ah, that's wrong. That would never happen." So that's a difficult role because you're kind of between the devil and a deep blue sea on those.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, De Niro is famous for wanting to be accurate. I mean, in crazy ways. How does I remember him calling when he did Goodfellas? I remember reading that he was calling Henry Hill all the time, asking like, how did Jimmy hold his cigarettes, and that kind of things like that.
Yeah, I think he's a method actor. I think he comes from that genre, and he's been doing it a long time and very successfully. I like him. I think he's a really talented guy.
Yeah, I think he's fantastic. I think he's done just some of the roles that he's been in are all time classic roles. Same with Pacino. That realism piece. When you compare it to the expectations that an audience has that have been conditioned by 100 years of cop movies and 60, 70 years of cop TV shows. You run into that same sort of conflict with your novels too, though, right? I mean, people have expectations when they read stuff, and yet you, as a former law enforcement officer, you kind of have to get it right. There's not a ton of room for not doing it right, even with dramatic license.
No, there's not. And when people read your stuff, and they're kind enough to offer constructive criticism, and I think you have to, as a writer, you got to accept that, and actually you should kind of cherish it, because if somebody cares enough to tell you where you made a mistake, that's good. So I've been fortunate. I haven't had too many of those mistake ones, because I do work very hard at trying to make it technically correct. The latest book, Still Waters, it's up in Montana and Wyoming and Idaho, and that's outside of my comfort zone for the most part, being born and raised in the Bay Area. So if I'm writing about San Francisco, that's easy. I won't have two north-south streets intersecting. But on I-25, somewhere out of Casper, Wyoming, I'm out of my depth. So what we did, my wife and I got in the car and we drove up to Idaho, through Idaho, over to Montana, down through Montana, over to Wyoming, then down to Colorado. And so if I have in the book that the bad guy stopped at a rest stop 2 miles south of Casper on I-25, that's really there. I don't want somebody from Casper picking that book up, if anyone from Casper picks the book up, and say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. There's no rest stop there. So I try to make the book accurate, and I try to make the investigation accurate, and I'll deviate from the investigation in the book to personal segues on the investigators, and I do that because I'm trying to let the reader understand there's a time gap going on. Fingerprints are being checked, DNA may be at the lab, but you don't get the DNA in 15 minutes. It takes time.
What?
Yeah. TV, you get, it's there, but I get that too. I understand. An hour-long episode is really 43 minutes after you take the commercials and everything out of it. So they've got 43 minutes to solve a triple homicide. You can't have a 2-week lapse in that waiting for DNA evidence. You got to have the fill. So what I've tried to do is to make the characters interesting and build a backstory for the characters and use that as the continuum, so that while they're waiting for something to come back, there's something else going on of interest.
Yeah, and so you explored one end of that problem, like, I got to make sure I'm accurate. How do I ensure accuracy? I guess the other wrinkle is are you held to a higher standard because you were in law enforcement if you want to dial something up to 11 or do something that doesn't exactly work that way in real life? It feels, I mean, in my own experience, it feels harder to deviate from that comfortably, whereas somebody who maybe was never in the profession can get away with it without, maybe as much scrutiny. So it's not so hard that, like, I know the right way to do it, but that doesn't, much like that actor or director in the film, like you were talking about, wants to make a change that isn't 100% accurate. I wonder if former practitioners are held to a slightly more stringent standard where that's concerned.
I think we are. I think I can't speak for all the ex-cops that write, but we read each other's stuff, and if I'm reading something, and I'll use Joseph Wambaugh as an example, who passed away about a year ago. He probably was as good a cop writer as there has been. It was remarkable, and he had
Pioneer.
he had this incredible ability to write a crime fiction story, some of which was hysterical. And I mean, I remember reading one of his books in a doctor's office in a waiting room and just laughing out loud reading the book and people looking at you like you're crazy. And then he changes
Probably
gears.
the choir boys.
Then he changes gears and writes The Onion Field, which, is just gut wrenching. So he was a really a talented guy, and he could go from one to the other. So when you read his stuff, the crime fiction stuff, I think you give him a little more latitude. The Onion Field, no, he's held to an absolute high standard. That's true crime. That's really not crime fiction. But not too many people do that. Not too many people switch from one to the other. It's a very different style of writing. And I think true crime can be really tough because you have one case for the most part. You have one investigator or maybe two, a partner, and that's it. I mean, it's focusing on that case and step by step through it. Former LA officer named Rick Jackson. He's just written a book called Black Tunnel, White Magic. And it's a true crime story about a homicide that occurred in a tunnel up in Chatsworth, an old train tunnel. And I talked with him, and he said his first draft was 700 pages. It literally took the case from inception to conclusion, every interview, every step of the way. And the publisher said, you got to get this down to no more than 350 or 400. No one's going to buy a 700-page true crime book. So he had to make adjustments. So I think it's harder because you don't want to leave anything out because you don't want to take away from the authenticity of a true crime story. I get the latitude of taking real cases and embellishing or scaling them down a little bit. And in my case, I use sometimes multiple cases to create one case. And and the other thing for me, I kind of want to minimize the gore. And sometimes in true crime, because you're focusing on a really difficult case, one that could have been gruesome, you're stuck with that. You have to play that out. You're not going to have a murder mystery without a murder. I mean, you got to have, but we talked about movies. Quentin Tarantino. I love Quentin Tarantino, brilliant writer and director, but sometimes Quentin gets over the top. Inglourious Bastards, for instance, where the guy hits the Nazi with the baseball bat. Now, I got that he killed him with the first three swings. The 26th and 27th ones were a little gratuitous. So what I want to do is have the issue take place, the story, the crime, and then I want it to be character focused, and I want it to be character relatable, and then the investigation. And secondly, I know this may sound corny in a way, but sometimes when I'm extracting a case that maybe I worked on or a close friend worked on, you don't want to make it so accurate that you put the family through a rehash. They pick the book up and look at it and go, "Oh my God, that's my daughter. I don't want to do that. I want to make it generic enough that it has authenticity, but it doesn't hurt somebody's feelings."
Well, let's frame this a little bit. We've been talking for a few minutes, and people would probably like to hear a little bit about your background. You said you worked for 4 different agencies. Maybe you could just briefly share like your career highlights, like where you started, what year, which agencies you worked with, what your career trajectory was. Because I mean, retiring as a police chief, that's at the pinnacle of the profession right there.
Well, yeah, you want the year I started, 1969. And I started in Berkeley. And 1969 in Berkeley was an interesting place to be.
I bet. I bet.
And I spent my first 9 years there, and I left as a sergeant and took a lieutenant's job in the city of Baldwin Park, which is a city of about 85,000 down in East Los Angeles. And very different.
So you could move. You could come in as a lieutenant. That's not the case very often anymore.
California has a unique system. California Public Employees Retirement, CalPERS. Most cities in California, municipalities, subscribe to that retirement system. So you can move from city to city and stay in the same pension system. So that allows.
But you can stay in the same grade as well, huh?
Well, that's up to the city. If the city wants to open up the exam, like a lieutenant's exam, at that particular time, they were going through some difficulties, and they wanted to bring in outside talent. So they brought in a couple of outside lieutenants and a couple of outside captains to support the new chief.
Wow.
So that was, but I could move my pension, so I didn't get hurt by the move. And I spent 2 years down there, and then I saw a job for a police captain in Farmington, New Mexico. And I threw my hat in the ring and got it. I was shocked. Got the call and went through the interview process and got the job. Great city, great city manager. It was very different than California, but in some respects, but not in others. The department was really good. They were first class. The officers were smart. A lot of college officers. The organization was well run. I only ended up as a captain. I only made some minor changes, to be honest with you, and those were things just to enhance things that existed there. And I brought some California ideas to make them a little bit better. And they were very receptive to it. They gave me a lot of latitude. And I had 4 years, and I really enjoyed it. I probably would have stayed longer, but they changed city managers. And when that happens, sometimes department heads go, and that puts you in a difficult position sometimes if you're number 2 in the organization. And, if you're in the running for it and don't get it, and somebody else is in, your career's pretty much ended there. So I saw a job opening for a captain in Novato, which is just about 30 miles north of San Francisco. It was a chance to come home. So I applied and got the job, and I spent almost 10 years as a captain there, and then 12 as the police chief. I got the chief's job in 92. So, it's an interesting ride. And because of that, I've met incredible number of interesting people, and you collect a lot of stories over that period of time, and characters. I have a wealth of characters that I've worked with.
So were you writing this entire time, or was writing something that you picked up after or near retirement?
The writing didn't come till after. When I left Novato, I went to L.A. I did my penance. So I went back for L.A. for 10 years. And I was the head of security for NBC Universal. So I got some exposure to the movies and the entertainment industry and theme parks and TV and all of that. Great job. Had a great boss. Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Get to meet anybody cool?
Oh, you meet lots of cool people. You meet a lot. And I found the A-list celebrities that you deal with on productions or whatever the case. And our property is so big at Universal. It's close to 500 acres. And with the theme park attached, and then on City Walk, which is the commercial part of the theme park on the outside of the park, there's 81 retail stores that you're responsible for as well. And so you get millions of people coming through the park, going through the stores, and then you've got 20 sound stages and a back lot and office space, production offices, post-production, you name it. It's all there. It's a one-stop shop. And so the A-list people that were there, I can honestly say just about every one of them, probably with maybe one exception, were the nicest people you could possibly want to work with. They were, they followed the rules. They understood what needed to be done. They were professional. The people that are hard to deal with sometimes are their personal assistants. They can be a little demanding, and they haven't quite realized that as somebody's personal assistant, you don't quite have the drag that your boss has. So you can't go in and order somebody around where, and again, I didn't have that experience with the A-list people. They didn't order people around. They made requests of you. Can this be done or can that be done? And some of the ones that were, big name, George Clooney, as an example, was probably one of the nicest people you'll ever come across. And he treated everybody well. It didn't matter if you were a grip. It didn't matter if you were the security guard at the stage. He treated everybody like they were a co-star. Just a really nice guy. And, and he's certainly at the top of the heap.
That's good to hear, because, you hear the opposite occur with some people. And, and we're in a bit of a toxic society anyway right now, where people are always looking for dirt on people. And so it's good to hear something positive like that, and that was the rule rather than the exception, that somebody was that nice.
And I think the boss, Ron Meyer, was the CEO, and he had been an agent, and he left the Morris Agency and started CAA with Mr. Ovitz from Disney and a couple other guys. But then they parlayed this little infant company, CAA, into the largest talent representation in the country, in the world probably. And he came from that to the studio, so he knew the industry, and frankly, he knew all of the A-list people because most of them had been his clients. I mean, they were so, and he had he had a great BS meter. Let's put it that way. He knew when something was good or bad, and he treated everybody well. He was a former Marine, high school dropout, went back and worked his way from the mailroom to the CEO. Just a great story. So that made it, again, that also made it a lot easier. He's also the kind of person, as was the president of the theme parks, if they were on the property and there was a piece of paper on the ground, which was rare, they picked it up and put it in the trash can. So, you see the CEO or the president of the studio picking up trash and putting it in the trash can, you're not going to ever walk by a piece of trash. As a consequence, the place was pristine. So,
yeah, leadership sets the tone is definitely true. Well, but you knew that based on your career. You spent, it sounds like, a good 3/4 of it in leadership roles. It sounds like,
for the most part, yeah. And I know what I want to see in a boss. And I have to say, at Universal, Mr. Meyer was at the very top of the heap. But my media boss was the president of operations. And he was fantastic. He was, again, one of these guys. He'd been in the business. He started out on as a grip, and then a key grip, and then a gaffer, and then he assistant producer, and then a producer, and on up the line, movies and television. So he too had a great BS meter. When somebody would try and tell him something, no, I did that job. I know exactly what you're talking about or what you're not talking about. And he picked really good people. His staff was incredibly loyal to him in the studio, and he garnered a following where, if there was a problem, there was probably about 10 of us on the staff, and if there was a problem that one person was dealing with, the other 9 literally would stay at the end of the meeting to see what they could do to help. It was, and again, it might have been somebody who was doing sound, and maybe at security I couldn't do anything for him, but I'd stay there like with everybody else to find out if I could. And that's what he garnered that with his people. And I thought, I love working here. This is a true team.
Yeah, job satisfaction just goes up with good leadership that allows people to to be the best versions of themselves, to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, that they are contributing to something, that they're respected and valued. It goes so much further than like, tyrant bosses who rule through fear and intimidation. I mean, that can work in the short term and get results depending on how you're measuring results, but there's such a shelf life there, and it totally destroys people's satisfaction.
I couldn't agree with you more. And again, I was real lucky down there. And then I came back home after 10 and took a job as the head of security for the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, which is a totally different world. And at Universal, if you were going to steal $5 million from us, you're going to have to bring in an 18-wheeler and try and steal something. At the museum, you could take $5 million out in a briefcase. It's a whole different world. And the museum was expanding. They were had a smaller footprint, but they expanded that, and then they went vertical 11 stories. So they switched from about 50,000 square feet of art space to 170,000 square feet of art space. Huge difference. So I was involved in putting the security in for the new facility. So I did that for a year, and once the doors got opened, the commute was tough. I was living up in Sonoma County, and basically taking the bus in the morning and in the evening, and it was about 4 hours on the bus, and it was just getting old. So, I kind of figured, well, this might be the right time to step away.
And so you stepped away and more into this role as an author. Your first book, Oh, What a Tangled Web, it's got a nice picture. It's a black and white photograph with a couple of black and whites on it, and the doors flung open on a city street on graveyard shift. It's a very evocative shot, makes me nostalgic. And you write an ensemble cast, if I'm not mistaken.
I do. And that's really, for me, it's been in my career. I've worked with a number of different people, and usually you get a lot more done, with a lot of different people, a lot of different inputs. And I think, especially working homicide, that there's a little bit of brainstorming going on cases, that you're picking your partner's brain, the other team's brain, etc. And in talking to homicide inspectors from LA, and let's see, LA doesn't have inspectors, D3s, D2s in LA, and the sheriff's department, homicide detectives, they all basically felt the same way, that there was the camaraderie of a team. And so I used that in the story. Interesting you mentioned the picture. The picture I saw online, and I loved it. I thought it was absolutely perfect for what I wanted. So I looked up the photographer, and it turns out he's a very good photographer, and he has a lot of really nice stuff. And I saw the price on some of his photos if you want to use it. So I called him and I said, this one didn't have a price. And I said, if I want to buy this and the rights to this to put it on the cover of a book. And he said, hey, go ahead. Just give me credit for it. I thought, okay, what a deal. So that's where the cover came from. And it was his generosity that allowed me to.
Wow.
So, again, so you pick the phone up and you ask. You never know. I was perfectly willing. If he listens to this, he's going to send me a bill. I was perfectly willing to pay for it because I liked the cover. I thought it. And then after that, the covers on the other books, for the most part, have been driven by my wife. She's a graphic designer, so I kind of have an in-house person to tell me what the cover should look like. And you can write really, really well, and your book goes on the shelf in crime fiction with 100 other authors, and somebody walks by, it's the cover that grabs them. That's the first thing they're going to see. And you can you can obviously have a great cover and a terrible between the covers. But if you have something really good to say and a good cover, I think that's a great combination. And that cover is what draws you to that book. And hopefully when they pick it up and thumb through it, they say, oh, this looks interesting. The cover won't necessarily get them to buy it, but it'll get them to at least open it.
A bad cover will keep them from opening it. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
and when you walk through a store, you see that, and I go with her. She and I will go to bookstores, and I'm looking at who's the competition, what are these guys writing, and is there somebody new out there, et cetera. And she's going from place to place looking at covers, taking pictures of them. I like this font. I like, So then when we go home and I'm writing something and I say this is going to be the gist of the story, then she'll start coming up with an idea for a cover.
Yeah, the hiding in plain sight cover has a really neat reflection of the building in it. It's a cool image.
That's the Legion of Honor in San Francisco.
Oh, well, and then you've got then Greed has looks like the Golden Gate going through the center of the Eiffel Tower. So, and I know that's topical because the book has a connection to France, and so that's almost like an optical illusion, or like it jars you when you see it. It's one of those covers you're like, wait a minute, what am I looking at?
I love the cover. She did a fabulous job on that. That was the Golden Gate Bridge is great. It's iconic. Everybody knows it. The Eiffel Tower is iconic. And she said, well, the story starts in Paris and ends up in San Francisco. How do we bring them together? How do we make this connectivity? And she said, we'll just substitute the North Tower for the Eiffel Tower. And so she started making it fit. And she's still not happy with it. If she could go back, she has a couple little things she wants to tweak on it, but too late now. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I think she did a great job on that one. And I like all of them. They're all different.
Yeah, the newest one, Still Waters Run Deep. I mean, it's got a bus on the cover that looks like it's in the aftermath of an explosion, still on fire. It's very dramatic. It's very kinetic. There's a lot of action in it, and so I'd say they're all very different.
The last one, it's just a minor little thing, but when you try and we talked about keeping things accurate. I bought the image. I found the picture. I really liked it, and then she started making it fit and all. And when I was done with it, or she was done with it, and talked to the publisher, and they sent me the first copies to proof. It dawned on me at that point that the bus that I had bought didn't have a Montana license plate. So I got the Montana license plate and sent it to the publisher and had them substitute the one that was on the bus for Montana. So if somebody looks at cover, that has a Montana license plate.
That's a good catch. People would notice for sure. They notice for sure. So is it the same ensemble cast all the way through, all through 4 books? Or do people slide in and out of the group? Is there a core character or two that revolves around? How did you work that?
The first 3 books, Over the Tangled Web, Hiding, and Greed, are all San Francisco, and we've come up with the Fog City stories for that group. And there's a 4th one in the mix right now. It's kind of in the final stages of construction. Then I went with a whole different cast for the Montana book. And it never comes back to San Francisco. It's all up in Montana and Wyoming. And the 2 detectives are Casper PD detectives. They start the case, and then it spreads and involves other people. And so I kind of like the new characters. And so I'm thinking maybe I'll do a second in that, maybe create a new sequence, a new series. Like Michael Connelly kind of did. You got Harry Bosch, and then he parlayed that into the Lincoln Lawyer, and now it's going to be Renee Bosch, and now he's got a totally new character on Catalina, who's an L.A. sheriff's deputy. So, it can be done. I mean, I don't know that I can do it as well as he does, but it can be done. So, I'm going to keep my initial characters. The initial team is two detectives. And then they end up working with a woman who is she was working cases, investigations involving sex trafficking, and it ties in with their homicide. So she ends up working with them, and then her talents are on display, and the lieutenant says, we have an opening coming up. So she comes over. Then in the second book, she gets a partner, and now we have 4, and we add another team. And some of this comes from, with my time as a police officer, I worked homicide in Berkeley for a little bit, and we would get 12 to 14 homicides in a year. Oakland was getting 180. San Francisco probably had 100. And I have a good friend who actually started me in the police business, who's a homicide investigator in the city. So I phoned him and I said, can I, on my days off, come over and spend the day with you guys? Be a fly on a wall, see how you do things. And he said, come on over. So I spent days over in San Francisco with the homicide team. So I got to go to crime scenes, sit on interviews. I really got to learn the ropes of how to run a homicide investigation from people that were at the top of the game. And we have, in the end of the second book into the third book, there's a new team that comes in who happens to be Hispanic. And they're kind of based on a team from San Francisco back in the 70s that were 2 Greek officers who were in homicide. And they both spoke fluent Greek, and they were first generation and hysterical because they'd have suspects in the interview room, and they'd be conversing in Greek, and it's all Greek to me. No one knew what they were saying. No one in the unit knew what they were saying. And so I've kind of taken that and created this kind of similar characters, only these guys are Hispanic. So now we have 6. Started with 2, we're at 6.
And then you got the opportunity to work with a couple brand new characters in a completely different setting. I mean, you're going from a very unique city. San Francisco has character. Some cities are a little bit more generic. I think you could plop them down in another state and they'd just be fine. But San Francisco is very, very much a character city and very much an urban environment, and that's very different than Casper, Wyoming.
And I was able to draw on my experience in New Mexico, in a city in a more rural area and a very much more rural state. New Mexico's population is less than the city of Los Angeles. So, and it's the 4th largest state in the U.S., the continental U.S., on landmass. So you have this huge state and very, very sparsely populated. So, yeah, that allowed me to learn about how policing is done in an environment that's more rural, and that you may not have at your department, at your beck and call, the lab. It may go to a state lab because agencies just can't afford to build a lab for themselves. So once the state has a lab, then you got to box your evidence up. Somebody has, if it's critical, they have to drive it down to the state lab. Then you have to wait because Albuquerque's got a case, Santa Fe's got a case. They're all in there. So it was good experience for me to see that, so I could incorporate that into the Casper situation, which isn't all that different.
There's a difference between the way you police as well. I mean, my career was in a mid-sized city, so if I got into it and was in desperate straits and put out a call like, "Hey, I'm getting my ass kicked, I need help," I need to hang on for about 40 seconds, and then help will be there. In some of these more rural areas, it's 40 minutes. And so you approach problems different. You approach people differently, and it's just a completely different style of policing. And so I would think it would have been fun to explore how, well, if this was in San Francisco, they just do this, but they're not going to do that. They're going to have to do something completely different.
I think for me, and that's perfectly right. That's true. And your backup may be a little further away. In Farmington, we were pretty lucky. We had a decent-sized department for the city, but our western boundary was the Navajo Reservation. So we had this interesting relationship because the Navajo Reservation is a separate nation. If you chase a bad guy from Farmington into Shiprock on the reservation, you've got to extradite them I mean, you just can't throw them in a car and take them home. You have to go through a whole it was easier to get people back from Colorado, than it was from the reservation. But I came to know people on the res, and I came to know a lot of the Navajo officers that worked up in our area, who were really good cops, and they understood policing. They understood that they were kind of a one-man band out there. On midnight shift, they all drove Suburbans, which you had to have something like that on the roads on the reservation. And if they made a car stop that was dangerous and they asked for backup, as you said, you could be looking at 45 minutes away at breakneck speed for the second car to get there. But we could get there from Farmington in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, depending on where they were. So we shared a lot of, backing each other up. State police were great. Same thing. Even the FBI. They had, believe it or not, because of the reservation, we had a 3-person FBI office in Farmington, which is almost unheard of, So we were I'm really lucky. And the Navajo, the Navajo police it was different. And the Navajo culture is different. It's not good, bad. It's just different. The reason we had code talkers in the Second World War was the Navajo language had never been written down. It's an oral passing on. So you learned it that way. Well, there was no way our enemies knew anything about the Navajo language. So in the Marine Corps, the Navajos spoke Navajo over the radio to each other, and the Japanese had no idea what they were saying. Yeah, and they couldn't crack it. And the other one was they had no numbers. That came later. So with older people from the reservation who may be working for the city now, they knew they had to be at work tomorrow. But 8 o'clock tomorrow may have been totally abstract. They would be there, but this concept of 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock was totally foreign.
Morning is about the closest you're going to get, right?
Yeah, that's it. So you had to. It wasn't that somebody was deliberately being tardy. That they just didn't get the number thing. So, but I love my time there. That was I got to know one of the fellows that ran a trading post, and I spent Saturdays sitting there just watching the interaction between the Navajos and the traders, and a whole different world. But I wouldn't have traded that for anything. It was great experience.
I wanted to ask you one other thing before we get out of here, and that is, you said you started your career in Berkeley. I think people who aren't police historians or aren't aware of their own profession's history would be surprised to learn what a large role Berkeley has, particularly in West Coast policing.
Actually, national policing, to be honest with you. For an agency of our size, the city of Berkeley is about, I'm going to say, 11, 12 square miles. And then you add the University of California in there, their state property. So, and they have their own police department. So we were a city of at that time, about 130, 40,000. But you add the university in there, who was at that time 30,000. We're approaching 160,000 that we have to police. So August Vollmer was kind of the father of modern policing. He was the police chief back in the 20s. And some of this stuff will come as a real shock to people. Berkeley was the first department in the country to have dogs. And they're probably the first ones that got rid of them. But when we were trying to get dogs back in the 70s, that wasn't going to happen with our council. But they were the first. They were the first to have bicycles. They were the first to have a radio in a patrol car. They had a woman officer in the 20s. They had black officer in the 20s. They were the first to use a lie detector. And then Vollmer, they had an MO system that preceded the FBI. And then Vollmer established the criminology school at UC. So, I mean, this is all stuff comes out of a 100 and something thousand city and a 200-person department, and they have supplied leaders to agencies all over the country. So,
yourself included.
Well, compared to some of these guys, I'm happy with it. And when people ask me about my career, I always go to Berkeley first. That's where I learned how to be a police officer, and I still do what the department represents. It's and it was probably one of the most ethical departments. I mean, you did not take a cup of coffee, literally, or you could get suspended or worse. And I can tell you, when you, when some of the other departments in the area, on the midnight shift, there was a Denny's restaurant, and that was the only place that was open between North Oakland, Berkeley, et cetera. So we'd go down there, and there'd be Oakland, CHP, a number of agencies, and we'd go to pay, and of course the Denny's policy at that time was you could get a half price deal. We couldn't; we get fired. So there'd be this big brouhaha between our officers and the management. So we finally settled it. We just left the difference as a tip and let it go at that. But we were paying full price for the meal. But if we had gotten, that was reported, you took that, you'd be looking for a job. And that stuck with me. I mean, I love that part because you don't owe anybody anything. You do your job, you do it well, and there's no favor. And sometimes it's hard with a young officer. You tell them, well, God, it's only a cup of coffee, or I say, yeah, it is. But there's going to come a morning where this guy's going to want something, and you're not going to either be able to do it or whatever. And he's going to be in the chief's office saying, I've given this guy X number of free meals, et cetera, and he didn't tow that car for me, or he didn't do something, or she didn't do something. So,
or he didn't get a walk on a deuce, or something like that.
That's it. And the beauty of Berkeley was it was so black and white. When you came on to work there was no gray area. You knew what the rule was, and that had been like that since Vollmer. And we used to joke about that when I was there. We had our 75th anniversary, and I was the president of the police association at the time, so I was somewhat of a troublemaker, and we talked about getting tie bars made for our ties that said 75 years of tradition unmarred by progress. So the city didn't see any humor in that, but it was a great place to learn because it was the generalist system where you were responsible for everything on your beat, from a traffic accident to a homicide, and you learned how to investigate and how to carry a caseload and how to do what you had to do. So no, I always gravitate back to Berkeley.
Well, people think about Los Angeles or Chicago or New York, and justly so, as being influential in the profession and so forth. But I do think people who aren't familiar would be surprised at the greatly outsized influence that Berkeley's had on the profession from the very beginning of professional policing. So I wanted to bring it up, and I'm glad you ran with it. So you mentioned there's a fourth book in the works, and is that getting close? Or fifth book, I'm sorry.
Fifth book, fourth in the San Francisco series. And it's getting pretty close. I'm getting some final edits. The people who are editing are offering their critiques, and that's, I may have said this before, that when you write, you think you've written War and Peace. You've got the first 5 chapters, and it's the best that's ever been written. The hell with Michael Connelly and Joseph Wambai. This is it. This is going to be the
Hacks.
one.
Hacks, everyone.
So you submit it to your editor and you wait, and 10 days later, you've given her 30, 40 pages, and they send back 40 or 50 pages of corrections. And you better have a thick skin, because nobody wants to see that. It's like being in elementary school, and I went to parochial schools. So when you write your essay and the nuns wrote and read all over your essay and sent it back to you, that was kind of like with the editors. So now with Word, you have this tracker system where they do the adjustments, and then it's in a column, so it doesn't put red all over your work, but they make your stuff better. Yeah,
sure.
And you can't sit there and say, oh no, I know more. You don't. You don't. You may have the idea and you may be able to get it down, but they give it depth and they give it life, where you may be writing really flat, and they give you ideas on how to make it pop, and that's you got to appreciate that and what they're giving you.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they're on your side, no matter how critical they're being. And I think that's what you have to remember. Even though it might sting, you might think you wrote a really beautiful analogy and it comes back, this is clunky, doesn't work, and you're like, oh man,
Oh, you've
I
read
was
some of my
equated
stuff.
hand in. No, I've written some of my own that is clunked just as badly. I've always equated like handing a manuscript over to somebody to edit, as the functional equivalent of, you know, walking into the living room at a house party completely naked and then standing there and kind of going, huh? Well, what do you think? Because there's a vulnerability to it. And so, early in my career, I had a couple of people that I made the mistake of exchanging work with whose goal was to make themselves as good as they possibly could, and to do so at my expense. And so they were just cruel for the sake of it. And I learned a good lesson because they weren't trying to make it better. They were trying to point out how much better they were, as opposed to the people that I've kept around and that I've tried to return the favor for, who are even more critical than those folks, but they do so standing shoulder to shoulder, pointing at the work and saying, here's where it can be better, here's where it can be better. And one of my good friends and who I've written like 7 books with, he always points out to me, he's like, look, I'm just trying to protect your brand here. When people pick up your book, I want them to think to themselves, this is going to be a quality piece of work that I'm going to enjoy, and it's not going to suck. And if you don't change this, they're going to say it sucks. So that's what I'm telling you, it sucks. And I do the same for him. And we're brutal with each other, but like I said, it's coming from a place of devotion and
Yeah, they care.
loyalty.
I mean,
yeah.
and that's what you have to tell yourself. If this person cared enough, and in my case, I figured they cared enough to buy the book. Okay, that's the first thing, and then they cared enough to tell you where they think it could be better. And I kind of look at it that way, not so much as a criticism, but as a way to make your writing better or make the story better next time around. And that's a real friend that does that. That's somebody who really does, as you said, it's someone who cares. And this business, the writing business, the publication business, is loaded with charlatans. It is. I had no idea how bad it could be. And I think I'm pretty smart. I'm a cop. I got all this. I got taken. I got taken by one of these companies. They're going to make you a New York Times bestseller. You just send them X number of dollars, and they're going to guarantee 15,000 copies. Well, it doesn't happen, and then you go to look them up, which I should have done before, and you find out they're headquartered in Pakistan or something, and they're judgment proof, and they took your money and ran. So, yeah, and God, the website for the books, and then the email. I must get 20 emails a day from people who want to sell me something, some service, and
mostly marketing.
Yeah, and how they can, and as a good friend who understands this stuff far better than I said, any of these guys that are sending you something that's got a Gmail address that ends in gmail.com, forget it. If they're a real honest to God business, they've got a legitimate email, and it's not their personal email. And so that's been good for me because I'm able to call out about 98% of the stuff that comes in each day. But yeah, you just get hammered. And you mentioned writers' conferences. You go to a writers' conference and you listen to a publisher, and they talk about that, saying, "Well, do you know do any of you out there know what it takes? How many copies you have to sell to hit the New York Times bestseller list?" Fast people in the audience, I don't know. It could be 100,000, 10,000 a week. And that's what they're talking about. That's moving a ton of books. Now, if you're Michael Conley or John Grisham, Sheldon Siegel, yeah, you move quantities like that. But that's a rarefied air. Conley, I think, has written 90 million copies. That number is just so astronomical. And I've met him. He's absolutely one of the nicest people I ever want to meet.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Immensely talented. And and actually almost shy. He's not.
Yeah.
He
He is, isn't he?
Yeah, I find it fascinating that his characters are so bold and so lively and not that he's not all of those things, but he's reserved. He doesn't flaunt his talent. He doesn't flaunt his success. He's very mild mannered. I really like him. I think he's just a really nice guy.
I was fortunate enough to meet him briefly once at a conference, and that was my impression as well. He didn't, he meets a whole lot of people, and he didn't look through me when we spoke, and he came off exactly the way you described, and I do think he's a good writer. I'm partial to the Bosch and the Mickey Haller books. Personally, out of his catalog, but the poet ones were interesting too. You talk about bestsellers. Well, where can people find your book to help make it a bestseller? Where's the best place to find any of your novels?
They can go. The website is probably the best. The GoldenGateTales.com. And from the website, you can go to the books. There's a heading for books, and it'll list all 4 books. And then you click on the book. It gives you a little history, a little story, and then Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, etc. When you click on that, you can make the purchase. So that's, and I'm still doing some book signings. I'm doing one. What's today? Saturday. I'm doing one at the Barnes & Noble here in the Bay Area on Saturday, and I think I have another one at the end of the month. And those are always fun. They're sometimes you don't sell a lot of books, but you meet a lot of people, and that's interesting. And until I had no idea how many writers there were out there until you do a book signing, and how many people want to talk to you to get their book published. What's the they're not buying anything, and it's okay because they're in the bookstore, which I think is great to begin with. I love seeing people in bookstores, and what I really have enjoyed at the signings is seeing how many parents are there with kids, and the kids are buying books. I have hope for the next generation coming along. They're actually reading, and to me that's fantastic. And if somebody just wants to stop by and ask a question, that's fine too. I mean, that's what you're there for. If you move a few books, that's good too. So, but the meeting people is fun.
Yeah, for sure. So this will drop on the 6th of May of 2026 of the Common Era. So if you were listening to this before May 9th of 2026, you can go to the Barnes & Noble in Burlingame, California, and see Brian Brady there, maybe buy a book. Other than that, GoldenGateTales.com is where you can find his work. All 4 books are listed there, and description and links to buy them. Brian, it's been really great talking to you, and I do hope we cross paths at a conference sometime and can swap some tales out of school.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, great conversation with Brian. Good guy. Check out his books. It's always an interesting thing to me when there's a strong sense of place in addition to character with books, particularly the crime fiction novels that really show what it's like to be involved in that sort of situation in a unique place. And San Francisco is certainly a city with character. So check out Brian's work and check out the next episode of Wrong Place, Right Crime, in which we will see the return of Aaron Philip Clark. Interviewing Aaron for the second time on the show. Caught up with him after the release of his first book, Under the Color of Law, which was spectacular. And he's been doing a lot since then, and we explore that. Aaron's a really nice guy, really thoughtful, articulate, smart man, and fun to talk to. I really enjoyed my conversation with him. This podcast has been a lot of fun for me, and one of the things that I always enjoy is once the mic goes off, then the conversation often continues and is every bit as enjoyable. So that definitely happened with Aaron both times. So definitely tune in next episode when I talk with Aaron Philip Clark. Quick Zafiro update for you before we go. A couple of books that are out now that you can check out, and remember, you can get them cheaper at the Code 4 Press bookstore at code4press.com. The third Sandy Banks thriller, A Hard Favored Death, is out everywhere now. You can get it anywhere you want. This is also included in the box set of Sandy Banks thrillers, all 3 of them together. Same is true for the Split List, a Bricks and Cam job. This is a pair of novellas, solo adventures for our heroes, written by Eric Beetner and myself, the fourth book in the series, and that also is available in a box set, so you can get a deal there. Now, I dropped this in the last episode, but I'll repeat it here. I am releasing expanded and revised edition of Under a Raging Moon. This was the first River City novel, first published in 2006, and first written in 1995. So it was by far what I considered the weakest of my books, and therefore the only one that'll get the expanded and revised treatment. But it's been a lot of fun to go back in and add some scenes and flesh out some scenes and work on some characters to bring them to life a little more. And of course, to work on the craft and make for easier reading for you when you pick it up. So if you already own it on ebook, it'll update automatically through whichever platform you bought it, if it was a retail platform. But that's the new expanded and revised 20th anniversary edition of Under a Raging Moon, book 1 in the River City series. All right, I want to say thank you to Brian Brady for coming on the show, and to you, the listener, for being here, making it all worthwhile. I hope you come back and listen to my interview with Aaron Phillip Clarke next episode. Until then, this is Frank Zafiro reminding you that sometimes you gotta be in the wrong place to write crime.